At my husband's real estate launch party, his mother announced his engagement to his 26-year-old interior designer in front of our entire industry. She's everything his current wife isn't: young, creative, and inspiring, she declared. The crowd toasted as I stood there like a ghost at my own funeral. Until I revealed the designer's true identity, and one announcement that night cost them everything. She's young, creative, and inspiring. Everything Trevor needs in a business partner and life companion. Vivian, my mother-in-law, proclaimed to the packed ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, her arm wrapped around Sienna Cross like she'd discovered the perfect daughter-in-law replacement. The entire room of real estate professionals, investors, and business associates stood frozen with their champagne glasses halfway to their lips, watching this family drama unfold in real time. I felt my knees buckle as Trevor stepped forward to embrace Sienna, accepting congratulations from colleagues who'd attended our wedding 7 years earlier. They were celebrating my husband's engagement to another woman while I stood there watching my marriage die in public. But as I witnessed this nightmare unfold before me, my mind raced backward through months of warning signs I'd been too trusting to see clearly. Every suspicious moment, every strange behavior, every red flag I'd rationalized away now crystallized into perfect, devastating clarity. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing stories about women who refuse to be silently discarded. If you believe that marriage vows should mean something and that betrayal deserves consequences, please consider subscribing. It helps us reach more women who need to hear this. The signs had been building since early summer. Subtle at first, but growing more obvious with each passing week. It started with Trevor's work schedule becoming erratic in ways that defied explanation. He'd always been dedicated to his real estate development business, but this change felt different, more secretive, more personal. He began claiming evening meetings with potential investors that somehow never appeared in any project documentation I had access to. When I'd offer to pack him dinner for these late consultations, he'd wave me off dismissively. Already ordered catering for the client presentation, he'd say. Though when I'd call his office after hours to check on him, his business partner Knox would tell me Trevor had left hours ago for personal appointments. The contradictions were glaring, but I convinced myself there must be reasonable explanations I simply wasn't seeing. His personal habits shifted in ways that made my skin crawl with unease. Trevor started showering immediately after coming home, even on days when he claimed to have been in air-conditioned conference rooms all evening reviewing architectural plans. His cologne became heavier, more expensive, a woody musk scent that replaced the familiar citrus fragrance I'd bought him for Christmas. He switched aftershaves too, abandoning products that had been part of his routine for years in favor of something that made our bedroom smell foreign and uncomfortable. The phone became his constant companion, never leaving his sight, even during our most intimate moments. He'd take it to the bathroom, keep it face down during dinner conversations, and sleep with it under his pillow instead of on the nightstand where it had rested for 7 years of marriage. When it buzzed during movies or quiet evenings together, he'd glance at the screen with an expression I'd never seen before. Excitement mixed with guilt that made my stomach turn with dread. Our credit card statements began telling a story I was too frightened to read properly at first. Expensive restaurants appeared with increasing frequency, places like Bella Roma, the Garden Terrace, and Moonbeam Bistro, establishments known for romantic ambience rather than business networking. When I'd ask about these charges, Trevor would spin elaborate tales about client entertainment and investor meetings, but the timing never aligned with his stated schedule. The receipts showed intimate dinners for 2 at 8:30 on nights when Trevor claimed to be in project meetings that officially ended at 5 o'clock. The restaurants he was visiting specialized in couples dining, with candlelit tables and wine pairings designed for romantic evenings rather than professional discussions. I began secretly photographing each statement before Trevor could review them, building a collection of evidence I wasn't ready to confront. Jewelry purchases started appearing monthly, small amounts individually, but forming a damning pattern when viewed collectively. Delicate gold earrings from Sterling Jewelers, a silver bracelet from Crown & Company, pearl earrings from Prestige Gems. When I searched our house thoroughly, thinking perhaps Trevor was planning surprise gifts for our anniversary or upcoming holidays, I found nothing new in my jewelry collection. These beautiful, expensive items were going somewhere else, to someone else who was receiving the romantic gestures I'd stopped getting months ago. Hotel charges became the most devastating evidence, though I desperately tried to rationalize them away. The Metropolitan Hotel appeared regularly, luxury suites booked for multiple nights during periods when Trevor claimed to be attending real estate conferences in other cities. When I'd call the hotel's events coordinator to ask about conference details, pretending I was trying to coordinate my own schedule around his travel, they had no record of any real estate events during those dates. The executive suites were being booked under Trevor's personal name for what were clearly romantic getaways with someone who definitely wasn't his wife. The room service charges, spa treatments for two, and late-night champagne deliveries painted a picture of intimate weekends that made me physically ill to imagine. Vivian's sudden increased involvement in our marriage should have been the clearest warning sign of all. She'd never fully approved of me, but her disapproval had always been manageable through polite distance and superficial pleasantries. Recently, her approach became strategic and purposeful in ways that felt like a coordinated campaign against our relationship. She began arriving for unannounced visits when she knew I'd be at work, spending hours alone with Trevor discussing topics they'd immediately stop talking about the moment I came home. During family dinners, Vivian started making pointed observations about marriages requiring growth and adaptation to survive modern pressures. She'd mention other couples who'd made difficult but necessary changes to find happiness, her eyes fixed on me during these supposedly casual comments. Her remarks about my career became sharper and more frequent, suggesting that working women sometimes lost touch with their feminine instincts and family priorities. When I tried to engage Trevor in conversations about our future plans, vacations we might take, or even simple weekend activities, Vivian would interject with opinions about young people being too quick to settle for comfortable rather than pursuing their authentic dreams. The most disturbing change was in Trevor's treatment of me. The man who'd once sought my opinion on everything from his clothing choices to major business decisions suddenly acted like my thoughts were irrelevant background noise. He'd make significant plans without consulting me, change our social commitments without explanation, and dismiss my concerns about his behavior with patronizing reassurances that I was overthinking things or being too sensitive. Our physical relationship became mechanical and distant, like he was fulfilling marital obligations rather than expressing genuine affection. He'd turn away immediately afterward, reaching for his phone instead of holding me the way he used to. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the ceiling with profound dissatisfaction, like he was trapped in a life that no longer brought him joy. The final piece of devastating evidence came just 3 weeks before tonight's launch party. Trevor had left his laptop open on our kitchen table while he showered, displaying an email thread that shattered what remained of my denial. The messages were from someone named Sienna Cross, discussing meeting arrangements with an intimacy that went far beyond any professional correspondence I'd ever seen. She'd written about missing him during his recent business trip to Denver, mentioning specific details about his hotel room and their dinner plans that proved she'd been there with him. Her messages referenced inside jokes, shared experiences, and future plans that revealed a relationship that had been developing for months while I'd been obliviously playing the role of devoted wife. Now standing in this ballroom watching Trevor accept congratulations on his engagement to this Sienna Cross, I finally understood that every warning sign had been leading to this moment of public humiliation. The months of suspicious behavior, unexplained expenses, and emotional distance had all been building toward tonight's devastating revelation. But what I didn't yet realize was that Sienna Cross's arrival in our lives had been far more calculated than a simple affair. And the true scope of deception was about to unfold in ways I never could have imagined. That Sienna Cross had been no ordinary interior designer became devastatingly clear as I stood watching Trevor celebrate his engagement to her. But to understand how she'd infiltrated our lives so completely, I needed to remember that first day she'd walked into our world, the day everything began unraveling without me realizing it. It was a Thursday morning in late June when I first laid eyes on her. I'd been delivering quarterly marketing reports to Knox, Trevor's business partner, when this stunning young woman glided through their office reception area like she was walking a red carpet rather than entering a commercial real estate firm. Her chestnut hair caught the morning sunlight streaming through their floor-to-ceiling windows, and her tailored cream dress fit her perfectly. The kind of expensive outfit that should have been my first clue that something wasn't right about this supposed interior designer consultation. Every conversation in the lobby seemed to pause as she passed. Knox stopped mid-sentence to stare, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Even the security guard straightened up behind his desk, suddenly very interested in appearing professional. Sienna moved with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're the most captivating person in any room, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Within minutes, Trevor had emerged from his office, practically radiating excitement. His entire posture had changed, straighter shoulders, brighter smile, animated energy that I hadn't seen from him in months. He called across the reception area, his voice carrying enthusiasm that made my chest tighten with unease. "Come meet our new interior design consultant, Sienna Cross." Cross. The name should have registered immediately. Should have connected to Harrison Cross, one of the city's most prominent divorce attorneys and, surprisingly, one of Trevor's biggest clients. But I was too focused on the way Trevor's whole demeanor had transformed in this woman's presence to process the significance of her surname. Sienna extended her hand with practiced grace, her grip firm and confident in a way that felt rehearsed rather than natural. "Such a pleasure," she said, her voice warm enough to seem friendly while her emerald eyes studied my face with uncomfortable intensity. "Trevor has shared so much about the vision for this project." The comment struck me as odd because Trevor rarely discussed specific project details, claiming client confidentiality. When I glanced at him, his expression carried the guilty flush of someone who'd revealed more than he should have. His face told me he'd been sharing intimate details about our business with this woman he'd supposedly just met. Sienna graduated from Denver Art Institute with degrees in interior design and business management, Trevor explained, his hand hovering near her elbow in a gesture that felt inappropriately intimate for a professional introduction. "She'll be creating sophisticated, luxurious environments for our high-end commercial developments." Sophisticated, luxurious environments. In my 15 years of marketing experience, I'd never heard of interior design consultations beginning with such grandiose language for standard commercial space planning. Most projects started with basic functionality discussions and budget parameters, not romantic descriptions of luxury experiences. Over the following days, Sienna's presence became impossible to ignore. Her workspace was positioned in the executive wing, directly adjacent to Trevor's office with clear sight lines to every important meeting room in the building. Her computer setup included premium design software and system access that most consultants didn't receive until their second or third project with the company. Brooke from reception was the first to voice what everyone was thinking during our Friday morning coffee ritual. "Something feels off about that new designer," she said, checking around the break room to ensure we weren't being overheard. Yesterday she requested comprehensive budget reports covering the last 2 years, asking specific questions about profit margins and client relationships that sound more like business development than interior design consultation. I'd noticed the same thing during our monthly project meeting. While other consultants focused on space planning and aesthetic elements, Sienna asked pointed questions about client retention rates, revenue projections, and competitive positioning that revealed sophisticated understanding of real estate development far beyond decorative concerns. Her inquiries weren't broad learning-focused questions you'd expect from someone new to commercial design. They were targeted investigations suggesting she was searching for something specific. "She's requesting access to confidential client files that require partner approval," Brooke continued, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper, "but somehow she's getting authorization for everything." Knox mentioned that Trevor personally signed off on clearance levels that took our senior consultants months to earn. The morning coffee ritual became the most painful part of my daily routine. Every day at precisely 8:15, Trevor would walk through the office carrying 2 cups from the expensive coffee shop across the street, his usual black coffee and an elaborate drink that hadn't existed in his routine until Sienna's arrival. A caramel macchiato with oat milk and extra foam that cost more than most people spent on lunch. He'd deliver this overpriced beverage to Sienna's desk with attention and care he used to reserve for special occasions with me. I'd watch from my position near the copy machine as he lingered by her workspace, engaging in animated conversations that made both of them laugh with genuine enjoyment. Their body language during these interactions was unmistakably flirtatious. Sienna would lean forward when speaking, Trevor would find excuses to touch her shoulder or gesture near her hand, and both maintained eye contact longer than professional courtesy required. The meetings became even more disturbing to witness. Trevor began including Sienna in strategy discussions that had nothing to do with typical design responsibilities. She'd sit at the conference table with senior management, contributing insights and observations that suggested she understood their business operations better than employees who'd worked there for years. During presentations, Trevor would defer to her opinion even when it contradicted recommendations from more experienced team members. "What's your perspective on this, Sienna?" became his standard response to complex business questions, as if a recent graduate's viewpoint carried more weight than the combined experience of his senior staff. Other executives started exchanging confused glances during these meetings, clearly wondering why an interior designer was being treated like a high-level business consultant. River, Trevor's younger brother who worked in their accounting department, mentioned during one of our casual conversations that Trevor had specifically requested Sienna be included in every project he oversaw, regardless of whether it related to her supposed design expertise. "It's unusual," River confided. "Most consultants rotate through different types of projects to gain broad experience. Trevor seems determined to keep her exclusively within his sphere of influence, even for developments that don't require any interior design work." The transformation in Trevor's behavior around Sienna was embarrassing to witness. He'd light up whenever she entered a room, his face brightening like he'd just received unexpected good news. During team meetings, his voice would soften when addressing her, taking on an almost protective tone that made my skin crawl with recognition. I'd seen that expression before. It was how he'd looked at me during our early dating years, when everything I said seemed fascinating and every smile I gave him felt like a precious gift. Other employees began noticing the obvious favoritism. I'd overhear whispered conversations about Trevor's special interest in the new designer, speculation about whether their relationship extended beyond professional consultation. The gossip was uncomfortable but not entirely surprising. Sienna's rapid integration into executive operations and Trevor's obvious infatuation with her had created an office dynamic that felt charged with inappropriate tension. What disturbed me most was how quickly Sienna had gained access to information about our personal lives. Through Trevor, she learned details about my background, my preferences, my daily routines that no business consultant should know. Her questions filtered through my husband felt like intelligence gathering disguised as friendly curiosity about his family life. "Sienna was wondering about your marketing background," Trevor would mention during dinner. "She's impressed that you studied communications and asked if you missed working in that field directly. Another evening brought Sienna noticed you don't wear much jewelry and wondered if that reflects your personal style or if I haven't been sufficiently romantic lately." Each inquiry revealed that Sienna was paying uncomfortably close attention to aspects of my personal life, gathering information that felt strategic rather than casually interested. Through Trevor's unwitting cooperation, she learned that I valued privacy over social activities, that I'd been disappointed by our struggles with infertility, and that I'd gradually become isolated from college friends after marriage. Standing in that ballroom months later, watching Sienna accept congratulations on her engagement to my husband, I finally understood what I'd been witnessing during those early weeks. She hadn't arrived as a genuine design consultant seeking professional development. She'd come with a specific mission, and destroying my marriage was apparently part of her assignment. The systematic destruction of my marriage didn't happen overnight. What I witnessed over the following weeks was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation that revealed Sienna's true expertise wasn't in interior design. It was in human psychology and strategic deception. Her approach to Trevor was surgically precise in its execution. Every afternoon at exactly 3:30, she'd appear at his office door carrying design portfolios that somehow always required his immediate expertise. The timing was deliberate, during the post-lunch energy dip when his defenses were lowest, never when other executives might witness their interactions. "I'm struggling to understand these spatial flow concepts," she'd say, her voice carrying just enough confusion to make Trevor feel indispensable, while her intelligent eyes suggested she grasped architectural principles better than most senior developers. She'd lean across his desk to point at specific drawings, her expensive perfume filling the office space and lingering long after she departed. I'd watch these performances through the glass partition separating Trevor's office from the main workspace, my stomach churning as Sienna executed her daily theater of helplessness. She'd tilt her head at precisely the right angle to catch the afternoon light streaming through his windows, making her chestnut hair shimmer as she listened to his explanations with theatrical fascination. Her note-taking was elaborate and unnecessary, as if his every word deserved preservation for future reference. "Trevor is such a brilliant mentor," she'd announced to nearby colleagues within his earshot, her voice carrying clearly across the office floor. "I'm learning more from him in 1 week than I did in 4 years of design school. He has this gift for making complex concepts seem effortless." The flattery was calculated and relentless, designed to make Trevor feel like an exceptional teacher rather than a married man being seduced by someone young enough to be his daughter. Sienna's questions revealed sophisticated understanding of commercial development that contradicted her supposed need for basic instruction, but Trevor was too intoxicated by her attention to notice the contradiction. Her conquest of Vivian was even more impressive in its thoroughness and strategic planning. During that second family dinner, Sienna arrived with white orchids, Vivian's favorite flowers, information I'd never shared with anyone at Trevor's workplace. She complimented the dining room's design with genuine-seeming appreciation while asking detailed questions about antique furniture that revealed extensive research into my mother-in-law's collecting interests. "These Chippendale chairs are absolutely magnificent," Sienna said, examining Vivian's prized dining set with the reverence of a devoted student. "I've been studying 18th century craftsmanship for a project, but I can't achieve the right authentication details. Do you think wood grain patterns might be the key to identifying genuine pieces?" Vivian practically glowed with pleasure at discovering someone who shared her passion for antique furniture. For 45 minutes, she explained construction techniques, period characteristics, and authentication methods while Sienna absorbed every word with the devotion of a disciple learning from a master. I sat there realizing Sienna had identified the fastest route to Vivian's affections through her collections and her desperate need to feel valuable and respected. "You should visit this weekend," Vivian offered spontaneously. "I could show you my complete collection and provide some authentication resources for your project research." Sienna's acceptance was gracious and enthusiastic, establishing a relationship that effectively circumvented me entirely. Within weeks, she was visiting Vivian twice weekly, examining antiques while engaging in conversations about traditional family values, proper marriage dynamics, and the importance of finding partners who appreciated domestic stability over career ambition. The coffee break intelligence gathering was where Sienna demonstrated her most sophisticated psychological manipulation skills. She timed these encounters to coincide with Trevor's moments of maximum vulnerability, immediately after challenging client meetings, before major presentations, during periods when quarterly numbers weren't meeting projected targets. Her approach appeared spontaneous but was clearly systematic. "You look absolutely exhausted," she'd say with concerned compassion, materializing beside his desk precisely when he was massaging his temples after particularly difficult conference calls. "Is everything manageable? You've been shouldering such tremendous responsibility lately." Trevor, feeling underappreciated at home and overwhelmed by business pressures, began sharing intimate details about our marriage that no employee should ever hear from their supervisor. Sienna listened with perfect attention, offering sympathy and understanding that made him feel heard and validated in ways he claimed I no longer provided. "Deborah doesn't comprehend the pressures of real estate development," he'd confide during these manufactured intimate conversations. "She expects business success to happen automatically without understanding the risks and long hours involved. Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the entire weight of our future alone." Sienna's responses were masterfully crafted to validate his grievances while positioning herself as the ideal solution to his problems. "You work incredibly hard to provide security for your family," she'd respond softly. "It must be frustrating when that dedication goes unrecognized. You deserve a partner who understands your ambitions and actively supports your dreams." Through these carefully orchestrated discussions, Sienna learned that Trevor felt trapped by domestic obligations, worried about his professional competence compared to younger developers, and desperately craved recognition for achievements that seemed invisible at home. She positioned herself as everything I supposedly wasn't: young enough to energize him, ambitious enough to match his drive, and grateful enough to appreciate his efforts. The expense fraud became increasingly audacious as Sienna's influence over Trevor's judgment grew stronger. Romantic dinners at exclusive restaurants appeared on company credit cards as client entertainment, despite the establishment specializing in couples dining rather than business networking. Weekend getaways to luxury resorts were classified as professional development retreats at locations that offered no educational programs during the specified dates. A $3,000 shopping expedition to designer boutiques became wardrobe consultation for client-facing presentations. Diamond earrings worth $1,500 were justified as consultant recognition awards for exceptional performance on projects Sienna had contributed virtually nothing to. A weekend at the Four Seasons was categorized as a strategic planning workshop for two people who somehow required 24-hour room service and couples spa treatments to develop quarterly objectives. When the accounting department questioned these suspicious expenses, Trevor became defensive and agitated, lecturing anyone who challenged these charges about the importance of consultant development, relationship building, and creating positive workplace culture. He'd justify every fraudulent expense as necessary investment in Sienna's professional growth, apparently oblivious to how these explanations sounded to colleagues who understood basic ethical boundaries. Sienna's elevation from design consultant to unofficial business partner happened so gradually that most employees didn't recognize how dramatically her role had expanded until her transformation was already complete. Her business cards suddenly identified her as a strategic development advisor rather than an interior design consultant. She began scheduling high-level meetings independently, using Trevor's authority to arrange appointments with major investors and potential clients as if she'd been granted official power of attorney. Other departments started directing complex operational questions to Sienna when Trevor was unavailable, treating her like she possessed decision-making authority that had never been formally granted or announced. She attended industry conferences as their company's official representative, networking with competitors and potential partners while distributing business cards that suggested she held senior management responsibilities. Her workspace relocated from the consultant area to the executive wing, positioned where she could monitor Trevor's meetings while maintaining constant visual contact with his office throughout each day. She acquired premium technology, advanced software access, and administrative support that junior employees typically waited years to receive. Sienna had systematically installed herself as Trevor's business partner while maintaining the elaborate fiction that she was simply a design consultant learning corporate procedures. The deception was so comprehensive that even I began questioning whether Trevor had received a promotion requiring this level of executive assistance, until I realized no such advancement had ever been announced or approved by their board of directors. Do you think wood grain patterns might be the key to identifying genuine pieces? Vivian practically glowed with pleasure at discovering someone who shared her passion for antique furniture. For 45 minutes, she explained construction techniques, period characteristics, and authentication methods while Sienna absorbed every word with the devotion of a disciple learning from a master. I sat there realizing Sienna had identified the fastest route to Vivian's affections through her collections and her desperate need to feel valuable and respected. You should visit this weekend, Vivian offered spontaneously. I could show you my complete collection and provide some authentication resources for your project research. Sienna's acceptance was gracious and enthusiastic, establishing a relationship that effectively circumvented me entirely. Within weeks, she was visiting Vivian twice weekly, examining antiques while engaging in conversations about traditional family values, proper marriage dynamics, and the importance of finding partners who appreciated domestic stability over career ambition. The coffee break intelligence gathering was where Sienna demonstrated her most sophisticated psychological manipulation skills. She timed these encounters to coincide with Trevor's moments of maximum vulnerability, immediately after challenging client meetings, before major presentations, during periods when quarterly numbers weren't meeting projected targets. Her approach appeared spontaneous but was clearly systematic. "You look absolutely exhausted," she'd say with concerned compassion, materializing beside his desk precisely when he was massaging his temples after particularly difficult conference calls. "Is everything manageable? You've been shouldering such tremendous responsibility lately." Trevor, feeling underappreciated at home and overwhelmed by business pressures, began sharing intimate details about our marriage that no employee should ever hear from their supervisor. Sienna listened with perfect attention, offering sympathy and understanding that made him feel heard and validated in ways he claimed I no longer provided. "Deborah doesn't comprehend the pressures of real estate development," He'd confide during these manufactured intimate conversations. She expects business success to happen automatically without understanding the risks and long hours involved. Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the entire weight of our future alone. Sienna's responses were masterfully crafted to validate his grievances while positioning herself as the ideal solution to his problems. You work incredibly hard to provide security for your family, she'd respond softly. It must be frustrating when that dedication goes unrecognized. You deserve a partner who understands your ambitions and actively supports your dreams. Through these carefully orchestrated discussions, Sienna learned that Trevor felt trapped by domestic obligations, worried about his professional competence compared to younger developers, and desperately craved recognition for achievements that seemed invisible at home. She positioned herself as everything I supposedly wasn't: young enough to energize him, ambitious enough to match his drive, and grateful enough to appreciate his efforts. The expense fraud became increasingly audacious as Sienna's influence over Trevor's judgment grew stronger. Romantic dinners at exclusive restaurants appeared on company credit cards as client entertainment, despite the establishment specializing in couples dining rather than business networking. Weekend getaways to luxury resorts were classified as professional development retreats at locations that offered no educational programs during the specified dates. A $3,000 shopping expedition to designer boutiques became wardrobe consultation for client-facing presentations. Diamond earrings worth $1,500 were justified as consultant recognition awards for exceptional performance on projects Sienna had contributed virtually nothing to. A weekend at the Four Seasons was categorized as a strategic planning workshop for two people who somehow required 24-hour room service and couples spa treatments to develop quarterly objectives. When the accounting department questioned these suspicious expenses, Trevor became defensive and agitated, lecturing anyone who challenged these charges about the importance of consultant development, relationship building, and creating positive workplace culture. He'd justify every fraudulent expense as necessary investment in Sienna's professional growth, apparently oblivious to how these explanations sounded to colleagues who understood basic ethical boundaries. Sienna's elevation from design consultant to unofficial business partner happened so gradually that most employees didn't recognize how dramatically her role had expanded until her transformation was already complete. Her business cards suddenly identified her as a strategic development advisor rather than an interior design consultant. She began scheduling high-level meetings independently, using Trevor's authority to arrange appointments with major investors and potential clients as if she'd been granted official power of attorney. Other departments started directing complex operational questions to Sienna when Trevor was unavailable, treating her like she possessed decision-making authority that had never been formally granted or announced. She attended industry conferences as their company's official representative, networking with competitors and potential partners while distributing business cards that suggested she held senior management responsibilities. Her workspace relocated from the consultant area to the executive wing, positioned where she could monitor Trevor's meetings while maintaining constant visual contact with his office throughout each day. She acquired premium technology, advanced software access, and administrative support that junior employees typically waited years to receive. Sienna had systematically installed herself as Trevor's business partner while maintaining the elaborate fiction that she was simply a design consultant learning corporate procedures. The deception was so comprehensive that even I began questioning whether Trevor had received a promotion requiring this level of executive assistance, until I realized no such advancement had ever been announced or approved by their board of directors. By early fall, Sienna's integration into our personal and professional lives felt complete. She'd become Vivian's antique collecting protégé and confidant, Trevor's indispensable business partner and emotional support system, and the office favorite who somehow managed every project while maintaining her innocent consultant facade. Her web of influence had expanded to encompass every aspect of Trevor's world, leaving me increasingly isolated and irrelevant. The holiday season was approaching, and Trevor had already begun making elaborate plans for the annual real estate launch party where he'd unveil his biggest development project to date. But this year, his excitement about the event carried an intensity that felt different from typical professional enthusiasm. His phone calls became more frequent, his planning more detailed, and his references to special announcements and important celebrations more pointed. Something significant was being orchestrated for that party. And I had the sinking feeling that Sienna's months of careful manipulation were building toward a climactic moment that would change everything forever. My sinking feeling about the launch party proved accurate as Trevor's planning reached levels of obsessive detail that alarmed even his business associates. The man who'd previously delegated event arrangements to professional coordinators was now personally inspecting every lighting fixture and testing multiple sound system configurations to ensure perfect acoustics throughout the hotel ballroom. The presentation has to create exactly the right atmosphere, he explained during one of his daily planning calls, his voice trembling with nervous energy. I've arranged for additional spotlights near the announcement area so everyone can see clearly when the important moments happen. His emphasis on important moments sent chills down my spine, though he refused to elaborate when I asked what he meant. The guest list became his consuming project, revised and refined dozens of times over 3 weeks. He'd call business associates to discuss whether specific clients should attend, whether certain employees deserved invitations, and how many tables would be needed to accommodate everyone he deemed essential witnesses. I watched him spread seating charts across our dining room table like a military strategist planning a crucial campaign, using colored markers to indicate different categories of attendees. Sienna needs to be positioned where everyone can see her clearly, Trevor muttered while adjusting place cards for the 5th time that evening. She should sit between me and Harrison Cross so she's part of the executive conversation. When I pointed out that consultants traditionally sat with other support staff, Trevor waved away my concern with impatient irritation. Sienna isn't like other consultants. She deserves recognition for her contributions to the company's success. His excitement about the party felt different from normal business enthusiasm. This carried the electric anticipation of someone orchestrating a performance where every element had been carefully choreographed for maximum impact. He'd test different microphone positions to ensure his voice would carry clearly throughout the ballroom, practice walking routes between tables to time his movements perfectly, and even rehearse gestures and facial expressions in front of our hallway mirror. Trevor's behavior during these pre-party weeks became increasingly erratic in ways that made our house feel like it contained a ticking time bomb. He'd pace our living room while conducting whispered phone conversations, his voice dropping to barely audible murmurs whenever I appeared in doorways. His usual appetite vanished completely. I'd prepare his favorite meals only to watch him push food around his plate while staring into space with an expression of profound anxiety mixed with anticipation. Sleep became impossible for him. I'd wake at 2 or 3 in the morning to find his side of the bed empty, eventually discovering him sitting in his home office staring at documents spread across his desk. When I'd approach to ask what was wrong, he'd quickly shuffle papers into folders and slam his laptop shut, insisting everything was fine while his hands shook with obvious nervous tension. His work performance began suffering noticeably. Colleagues mentioned his distracted behavior during important presentations, his inability to focus during budget meetings, and his tendency to forget crucial details about ongoing projects. The confident executive who'd once commanded respect through competence and decisiveness had been replaced by someone who seemed constantly on edge, as if carrying secrets that were physically exhausting to maintain. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked one evening after watching him stare at his dinner plate for 20 minutes without taking a single bite. "You seem incredibly stressed about something." "Just business pressures," he'd snap, then immediately apologize for his harsh tone. "Sorry, I'm fine. Everything's under control." But his trembling hands and the dark circles under his eyes suggested nothing was under control. Sienna's confidence during this period reached almost insufferable levels. She walked through the office like someone who'd already received a promotion that hadn't been publicly announced. Her posture straight with satisfaction and her smile carrying smugness that made my stomach turn with dread. During casual conversations with other employees, she'd make cryptic references to exciting changes ahead and new developments that would surprise everyone. "I have such a bright future with this company," she'd tell anyone who'd listen, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who possessed inside information about decisions that hadn't been made public yet. When colleagues asked about her post-consultation plans, she'd smile mysteriously and hint that her role might be evolving in ways that would benefit everyone involved. Her wardrobe underwent a dramatic transformation during these weeks, shifting from appropriate consultant attire to outfits that belonged in executive boardrooms rather than support positions. Designer dresses, expensive jewelry, and professional accessories that cost more than most junior employees earned in a month. She was dressing for a role she hadn't been officially offered, as if her promotion was already guaranteed and she was simply waiting for the public announcement. The most disturbing aspect of these weeks was how the office atmosphere changed around me. Conversations would stop mid-sentence when I entered break rooms, followed by awkward smiles and obvious topic changes that fooled absolutely no one. Brooke from reception, who'd been my coffee companion for 2 years, suddenly became unavailable for our usual morning chats. River from accounting avoided making eye contact during meetings, his warm greetings replaced by polite nods and hasty exits. I began noticing colleagues glancing between Trevor and Sienna with knowing expressions that suggested they understood something I was missing. The whispers followed me through hallways, conversations that ceased so abruptly when I approached that the resulting silence felt heavy with unspoken knowledge. Some co-workers started treating me with premature sympathy, their kindness carrying an undertone of pity that made me want to demand explanations no one seemed willing to provide. The most frightening part was Trevor's complete obliviousness to these changed dynamics. He was so absorbed in whatever secret plans were consuming his thoughts that he couldn't see how obviously his colleagues had become aware of his situation. The man who'd once been politically astute and socially aware had become so focused on his private drama that he'd lost all perspective on how his behavior appeared to others. Harrison Cross's presence at company events increased dramatically during this period, though his attendance felt more investigative than social. He'd position himself strategically to observe Trevor and Sienna's interactions without appearing obvious, his experienced attorney's smile never quite reaching his eyes when he watched their exchanges. During presentations, his questions became increasingly pointed and specific, probing into areas of Trevor's responsibilities with laser-like precision that suggested he was building a comprehensive case. I caught him photographing documents with his phone during the quarterly review meeting, quickly pocketing the device when he noticed my attention. His conversations with other employees seemed designed to extract information rather than maintain social pleasantries, though his subjects appeared unaware they were being systematically interviewed about Trevor's professional performance and personal behavior. His attention to Sienna felt particularly intense. He'd watch her movements around the office, listen to her conversations with other employees, and ask subtle questions about her background and qualifications that revealed far more interest than a casual observer would demonstrate. When our eyes would meet across crowded rooms, Harrison would nod slightly, as if we shared an understanding about something neither of us was prepared to discuss openly. His presence began feeling less like a concerned client attending corporate social functions and more like a detective gathering evidence for a case that was rapidly approaching its conclusion. The hotel ballroom had been reserved, the invitations sent, the stage set for whatever dramatic revelation Trevor and Vivian were planning to unleash on an unsuspecting audience. As the party date approached, I realized I was no longer just a wife watching her marriage crumble. I was about to become an unwilling participant in a public spectacle that would destroy everything I'd believed about my life, my husband, and my future. The public spectacle I'd been dreading finally arrived, and the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel buzzed with the familiar energy of our industry's most anticipated networking event, though I now understood I was about to become its unwilling centerpiece. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with gold and burgundy linens, while a jazz quartet played softly near the bar. The scene appeared identical to previous year's launch parties, yet the electric tension I'd been sensing for weeks had intensified into something almost tangible. Every smile felt forced, every laugh carried an undercurrent of anticipation, and the air itself seemed charged with the promise of drama about to unfold. I arrived alone after Trevor claimed he needed to be there early for final coordination with the event staff. The lie felt transparent now, though I'd accepted his explanation without question hours earlier. As I handed my coat to the attendant, I spotted him near the entrance greeting guests with manic energy that bordered on hysteria. His smile stretched too wide, his laughter rang too loud, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie repeatedly. Sienna made her entrance like an actress stepping onto a stage she'd been rehearsing for all her life. The emerald dress she wore hugged her figure perfectly, its fabric shimmering under the ballroom lights as she glided through the crowd with practiced grace. Every head turned to watch her progress through the room, every conversation paused as she passed, every colleague seemed drawn to compliment her appearance or engage her in animated discussion. Her confidence radiated from every gesture, the way she tilted her head when listening, the perfectly timed laughter at mediocre jokes, the graceful way she accepted champagne from waiters who lingered longer than necessary around her table. She moved through the party like someone who knew she was about to be crowned queen and was graciously accepting early homage from her future subjects. Vivian positioned herself strategically near the presentation area, her excitement barely contained as she monitored Sienna's social triumph. She kept checking her gold watch and scanning the crowd, apparently waiting for all the essential witnesses to arrive before beginning whatever performance she'd been choreographing for weeks. When she caught my eye across the room, her smile carried smugness that made my chest tighten with dread. "Deborah, you look lovely tonight," she said when I approached to fulfill social obligations, though her tone suggested she found my simple black dress disappointingly modest compared to Sienna's dramatic presentation. "I do hope you're prepared for an evening full of wonderful surprises." The emphasis on wonderful surprises sent warning signals through every nerve in my body, though I managed appropriate pleasantries while my mind raced through possibilities of what those surprises might entail. Around us, colleagues mingled with their usual networking enthusiasm, completely unaware they were about to witness something that would dominate industry gossip for months. The development team discussed new project timelines, the investment group celebrated quarterly achievements, and the administrative staff compared vacation plans while the stage was being set for my public destruction. Harrison Cross arrived precisely at 7:30, his entrance commanding immediate attention from senior management. I watched him survey the ballroom with the calculating assessment of someone evaluating a business transaction, his eyes lingering on Trevor and Sienna's interactions with particular intensity. When our gazes met briefly, he nodded politely, but something in his expression suggested he possessed information about tonight's agenda that most guests lacked. The dinner portion proceeded with deceptive normalcy. Conversations flowed over herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetables while I sat with marketing colleagues trying to focus on their discussions about campaign strategies and client retention. My attention kept drifting to the head table where Trevor sat beside Sienna, their conversation appearing intimate despite the crowded setting. As dessert plates were cleared away, I noticed the subtle shift in energy that preceded significant announcements. The jazz quartet concluded their final set, conversations gradually quieted, and guests sensed something important was about to happen. My heart began hammering against my ribs as Trevor rose from his chair and moved toward the small stage area where the microphone waited. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried clearly across the ballroom as he tapped his champagne flute with a silver dessert spoon. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate not just our newest development project, but the exceptional people who make our success possible." Polite applause rippled through the crowd as guests prepared for what they assumed would be standard business remarks followed by the resumption of party festivities. But Trevor's energy felt different from previous years, more focused, more purposeful, like someone about to deliver news he'd been anticipating with barely contained excitement. "Tonight, I want to take a special moment to recognize the outstanding contributions that have elevated our company to new heights," he continued, his voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. "Leadership isn't just about individual achievement. It's about recognizing and cultivating extraordinary talent that propels entire organizations toward their brightest futures." Trevor's face flushed deep red as colleagues turned to acknowledge him with approving nods and scattered applause. But I could see the tremor in his hands as he reached for his water glass, the way his smile failed to reach his anxious eyes, the subtle signs of someone about to participate in something that simultaneously thrilled and terrified him. "Our success has attracted truly remarkable people to our organization," Trevor continued, his gaze shifting meaningfully toward Sienna. "People who bring fresh perspectives, innovative approaches, and the kind of dynamic energy that transforms good companies into industry leaders." The room remained attentive but relaxed, expecting corporate praise followed by project announcements and networking opportunities. Nobody seemed to sense the devastating announcement that was about to shatter the pleasant evening atmosphere. "Which is why I'm absolutely thrilled to share some truly wonderful news with all of you tonight," Trevor declared, his voice rising with triumphant joy that made my blood freeze in my veins. The moment had arrived. Everything, the weeks of planning, the secret phone calls, the nervous energy, the strategic seating arrangements, had been building toward this single devastating revelation that would destroy my life in front of everyone I worked with. But before Trevor could continue, Vivian rose from her seat and moved toward the microphone with the confident stride of someone seizing her moment in the spotlight. She'd apparently decided this announcement deserved maternal endorsement to maximize its impact. "I want you all to meet Sienna Cross," Vivian announced with radiant pride, her voice carrying across the stunned ballroom. "Trevor's future wife and the remarkable woman who represents everything our family needs moving forward." The silence that followed felt like a physical force pressing down on the entire ballroom. Every conversation stopped mid-syllable, every champagne flute paused halfway to lips, every face turned toward the head table where Sienna sat glowing with victorious satisfaction while I stood frozen in the crowd, watching my marriage die in public. "She's young, brilliant, ambitious, and free from the complications that can sometimes hold successful men back," Vivian concluded with triumphant satisfaction, her words echoing through the stunned ballroom like a death sentence delivered with maternal pride. The silence that followed felt eternal. I stood frozen among the crowd, watching my husband embrace Sienna while accepting congratulations from colleagues who'd attended our wedding 7 years earlier. The betrayal was complete, performed in front of everyone who'd known us as a married couple, transforming my humiliation into evening entertainment. But as I watched this carefully orchestrated performance reach its devastating climax, something inside me snapped. The months of gaslighting, the financial deception, the public humiliation, all of it crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I wasn't going to remain the silent victim in their scripted drama. I took a deep breath, gathered every ounce of strength I possessed, and stepped forward into the center of the ballroom. The movement felt deliberate and powerful, like walking onto a stage where I finally understood my role wasn't to be the discarded wife, but the woman who would expose the truth. "Excuse me, everyone," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent room with authority that surprised even me. Conversations that had been resuming in nervous whispers stopped completely as faces turned toward me with curiosity and concern. "I think there's been some significant confusion tonight that needs to be addressed." Trevor's face went ashen as he realized I wasn't planning to disappear quietly from this scene. Sienna's confident smile wavered for the first time since I'd known her, replaced by an expression of alert caution that suggested she understood something was about to shift dramatically. The entire ballroom fell into complete silence, sensing that whatever was about to unfold would eclipse even the shocking announcement they'd just witnessed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced with growing confidence, feeling power flow through my voice as I reclaimed control of the narrative. "I'd like you all to meet Sienna Cross properly. Not just any Cross, but Harrison Cross's daughter." The collective gasp that erupted across the room was immediately followed by confused murmuring as heads swiveled between Sienna and Harrison Cross, who stood near the bar observing the proceedings with calculated attention. I watched Sienna's carefully constructed mask slip completely as people finally made the connection they'd somehow missed. "Sienna hasn't been working as an interior designer to gain business experience or to fall in love with my husband," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each revelation. "She's been conducting a comprehensive investigation into Trevor's business activities on behalf of her father's legal practice." The room exploded into whispered conversations as the implications of my words began sinking in. Trevor's face cycled from pale to red to a sickly green color as he processed what I was revealing to his colleagues and clients. Vivian looked completely bewildered, her moment of maternal triumph crumbling as she realized she'd been manipulated by someone far more intelligent than she'd imagined. Sienna stood motionless for several seconds, apparently weighing her options before making a decision that would define the rest of the evening. Then she stepped forward with the poise and dignity of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment to reveal her true identity. "Deborah is absolutely correct," Sienna announced, her voice now carrying the professional authority of someone dropping their carefully maintained disguise. "I am Harrison Cross's daughter, and for the past 4 months, I've been documenting Trevor's systematic misuse of business funds and client relationships." Her transformation from seductive designer to competent investigator was breathtaking in its completeness. The flirtatious mannerisms disappeared, replaced by crisp professionalism as she reached into her purse and withdrew a thick leather portfolio that had apparently been her constant companion throughout this deception. "Trevor has been charging personal expenses to corporate credit cards," she explained with clinical precision, opening the folder to reveal photographs, receipts, and detailed documentation. Romantic dinners at expensive restaurants have been classified as client entertainment. Weekend getaways to luxury resorts have been listed as business development conferences. Expensive jewelry purchases have been categorized as consultant appreciation awards. The room remained absolutely silent as Sienna methodically dismantled Trevor's reputation with facts and evidence that painted an undeniable picture of systematic fraud. Her presentation was thorough, professional, and devastating, delivered with the precision of someone who'd been trained specifically for this type of revelation. The evidence shows a pattern of deliberate financial misconduct spanning several months, Sienna continued, her voice steady and authoritative. Personal vacations charged as business travel, romantic gifts purchased with company funds, and expense reports that consistently misrepresent the nature and purpose of these transactions. As Sienna spoke, Harrison Cross began moving through the crowd toward the front of the room. His approach commanded immediate attention, and conversations died completely as everyone recognized the gravity of having the city's most prominent divorce attorney personally involved in what was unfolding. "Thank you, Sienna, for your exceptional work on this investigation," Harrison said with unmistakable paternal pride, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. "Over the past several months, I noticed irregularities in financial reports from companies that contract my legal services, patterns that suggested either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud within their management structures." His explanation was measured and professional, but his disappointment in Trevor was evident to everyone present. The room hung on his every word as he continued with the authority of someone who controlled the professional futures of everyone in that ballroom. "Rather than make accusations without substantial proof, I chose to conduct a thorough investigation using methods that would provide irrefutable evidence," Harrison explained. "My daughter volunteered for this assignment because her educational background in forensic accounting and her investigative training made her uniquely qualified to gather the comprehensive evidence we required." Harrison's presence had transformed the launch party from a social gathering into a legal tribunal, with Trevor standing exposed as the defendant who'd already been judged and found guilty by an impartial jury of facts and documentation. "Trevor Woodson," Harrison announced with formal finality that echoed through the stunned ballroom. "Based on the evidence my daughter has gathered, you will be facing both civil and criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty." The words landed like physical blows, each syllable punctuating the complete reversal of fortune that had occurred within minutes. Trevor stood speechless, his face cycling through disbelief, desperate anger, and growing panic as the full scope of his situation became clear. "Your professional reputation in this industry is finished," Harrison continued with the efficiency of someone protecting substantial business interests. "Every company in this room will be advised of your criminal behavior, and I'll personally ensure that tonight's revelations follow you wherever you attempt to restart your career." The same colleagues who'd been offering congratulations on his engagement moments earlier now stepped backward, instinctively distancing themselves from someone who'd become professionally toxic overnight. Vivian stood frozen near the dessert table, her face showing complete mortification as she realized her celebratory announcement had directly precipitated her son's public destruction. The launch party that was supposed to mark Trevor's triumphant business achievement had instead become the stage for his complete professional execution, witnessed by every person who'd ever worked with him or respected his business judgment. But as I stood there watching justice unfold in real time, I realized this was only the beginning of the consequences Trevor would face for choosing deception over honesty, temporary gratification over lasting integrity, and public humiliation of his wife over private resolution of our marriage problems. The aftermath was swift and merciless. The festive atmosphere that had filled the ballroom minutes earlier evaporated completely, replaced by the uncomfortable energy of people who'd witnessed something they'd rather forget. Guests began gathering their coats and purses with unusual haste, casting furtive glances at the destroyed tableau we'd become while murmuring awkward goodbyes to their hosts. The exodus was telling in its urgency. Former colleagues who'd been congratulating Trevor and buying him drinks suddenly discovered pressing reasons to leave early. Their warm handshakes and celebratory conversations were replaced by embarrassed avoidance of eye contact and hurried departures that spoke volumes about how quickly professional relationships could dissolve when ethical boundaries were crossed. "Well, this has certainly been enlightening," I heard someone whisper near the coat check. "I had no idea Trevor was involved in anything like this." The conversations were hushed but audible, creating a soundtrack of professional death that would follow Trevor long after tonight's revelations. The festive holiday music continued playing from the sound system, creating a surreal contrast to the devastating scene unfolding below the twinkling lights and elegant decorations. Upbeat networking songs about success and celebration provided an almost mocking backdrop to the complete destruction of a man's career and reputation. Trevor stood near the head table looking utterly abandoned, his confident posture from earlier in the evening completely collapsed. The same people who'd been toasting his success and congratulating him on his engagement now gave him wide berth, as if his professional toxicity might somehow be contagious. His attempts to engage departing colleagues in conversation were met with polite but firm dismissals that left him increasingly isolated. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," he insisted to anyone within earshot, his voice carrying the desperate hollow ring of someone whose lies had finally caught up with them. The expenses were legitimate business costs. "My relationship with Sienna was purely professional until very recently." But Sienna's evidence folder had already done its devastating work. The receipts, photographs, and detailed documentation she'd presented contradicted every excuse he attempted to offer. His explanations became increasingly frantic as he realized that no one, not his former colleagues, not the business associates who'd once trusted his judgment, not even the catering staff who'd overheard enough to understand his true character, believed anything he said anymore. His reputation, carefully built over years of professional achievement, crumbled completely in the space of a single evening. The weight of evidence against him was so comprehensive that his protests only served to insult everyone's intelligence further. Each desperate attempt at justification made him appear more pathetic and dishonest. Vivian had retreated to a corner chair near the presentation area, her face buried in her manicured hands as the full magnitude of her catastrophic mistake became clear. The woman who'd orchestrated tonight's announcement as her son's triumphant moment had actually provided the perfect stage for his professional execution. Her role in Trevor's destruction carried a cruel irony that wasn't lost on the remaining guests. Her effusive praise of Sienna's qualities, her public endorsement of their relationship, and her enthusiastic introduction had given Harrison's daughter exactly the credibility and platform needed to deliver the most damaging blow possible to Trevor's career. Former friends and social acquaintances began treating Vivian with a mixture of pity and subtle blame, understanding that her meddling in Trevor's marriage had created the perfect conditions for his downfall. The sophisticated society matron who'd spent decades building influential connections suddenly found herself socially isolated, her credibility destroyed by her own manipulative actions. Sienna, meanwhile, demonstrated remarkable grace under pressure as she methodically packed her evidence materials while fielding procedural questions from Harrison. Her transformation from seductive designer to competent investigator was one of the evening's most impressive revelations, proving she possessed skills that went far beyond anything her colleagues had imagined. Other party guests began approaching her with newfound respect, finally understanding they'd completely misjudged her capabilities and motivations. The woman they'd dismissed as just another pretty face seeking advancement through charm had actually been conducting a sophisticated undercover investigation that required exceptional emotional intelligence and strategic thinking. "I have to admit, I'm impressed," I overheard Knox telling another colleague. "The way she maintained her cover while gathering that level of evidence shows remarkable professionalism. We all completely underestimated her." Sienna's handling of Trevor's inappropriate advances and Vivian's manipulative behavior throughout her assignment demonstrated a level of self-control and dedication that commanded genuine admiration from people who now understood the true nature of her mission. Standing in that ballroom, watching my world reshape itself in real time, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions I hadn't expected. The vindication was both sweet and sharp. Finally, everyone could see what I'd suspected for months but couldn't prove definitively. Trevor's betrayal was no longer my private torment but established fact, witnessed by dozens of people who now understood why I'd seemed increasingly distant and unhappy at recent company events. But beneath the satisfaction of being proven right lay a profound sadness for the marriage I'd thought we shared, the future I'd imagined we were building together, and the man I'd believed Trevor could become. The dreams we'd discussed, the plans we'd made, the life we'd supposedly been creating, all of it had been fiction while he pursued his selfish desires at my expense. Yet underneath both the vindication and the grief was an unexpected sense of relief that felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for months. No more wondering if my suspicions were paranoid. No more questioning my own perceptions or gaslighting myself into believing his explanations. No more pretending everything was fine when clearly nothing had been fine for a very long time. The exhaustion of maintaining facades, hiding concerns, and protecting his reputation while he systematically betrayed our marriage lifted from my shoulders like a physical weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, knowing the truth was finally visible to everyone who mattered. The launch party that was supposed to celebrate Trevor's bright future had instead become the public forum for revealing his true character. Justice had been served with devastating efficiency, witnessed by everyone who'd ever respected his professional judgment or believed in his personal integrity. Harrison Cross approached me as the last stragglers gathered their belongings, his presence both commanding and oddly comforting in the chaos of the evening's aftermath. The hotel lobby had become a refuge from the ballroom's devastation, its neutral beige walls and soft lighting providing a stark contrast to the scene we'd just witnessed. "Deborah," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been orchestrating events from behind the scenes for months. "I believe I owe you a comprehensive explanation about how we arrived at tonight's conclusion." He guided me toward a secluded seating area near the lobby's fireplace, away from the scattered groups of departing party guests who were still processing what they'd witnessed. His manner was both paternal and professional, like a doctor about to explain a complex diagnosis to a patient's family member. "I've been monitoring Trevor's questionable business activities for nearly 6 months, Harrison began, settling into the leather chair across from me with the measured movements of someone accustomed to delivering serious news. The irregularities in expense reports from companies contracting my legal services weren't immediately obvious, but patterns emerged that suggested either remarkable incompetence or deliberate fraud. His explanation unfolded with the precision of someone who'd been carrying this burden alone for too long. The investigation had begun when routine financial reviews revealed discrepancies that couldn't be explained by normal accounting errors or administrative mistakes. Trevor's expense reports consistently pushed boundaries while remaining just barely within plausible limits, a strategy that suggested sophisticated understanding of how to steal without triggering automatic red flags. "I could have confronted Trevor privately," Harrison continued, his attorney's instincts evident in every calculated decision. "But men in his position are typically skilled at explaining away their mistakes, shifting blame to subordinates, or promising reform while continuing their destructive behavior. I needed irrefutable evidence that would leave no room for manipulation or negotiation." The scope of his investigation was far more comprehensive than I'd imagined. Harrison's team had been tracking Trevor's computer activity, monitoring his credit card transactions, and documenting his attempts to disguise personal expenses as legitimate business costs. Every fraudulent dinner, every unauthorized trip, every piece of jewelry purchased with company funds had been meticulously catalogued and verified. "We have video surveillance of Trevor using corporate credit cards for personal purchases," Harrison explained with the thoroughness of someone building a legal case. "Audio recordings of him lying about business expenses during client meetings, written documentation of his attempts to manipulate financial reports to cover unauthorized expenditures." But the most revealing aspect of Harrison's explanation was how carefully he'd protected my interests throughout the investigation. His team had gathered extensive evidence showing my complete ignorance of Trevor's criminal activities, my attempts to question suspicious expenses, and my obvious exclusion from his financial decision-making processes. "Your divorce attorney will have everything needed to prove Trevor's infidelity, financial irresponsibility, and systematic deception," he assured me, his voice carrying genuine concern for my welfare. "You'll be able to claim your rightful share of legitimate marital assets while being completely protected from liability for his stolen funds." Harrison's concern extended beyond mere legal protection. He'd ensured that industry records would show my professional competence and ethical behavior, safeguarding my reputation in a business community where association with financial fraud could destroy career prospects permanently. "Sienna's qualifications for this assignment were exceptional," Harrison said with unmistakable paternal pride. "She graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown with dual degrees in business administration and forensic accounting, then spent 3 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division before specializing in corporate security consulting. The revelation that Sienna was a trained investigator rather than a naive designer reframed everything I'd witnessed over the past months. Her ability to maintain her cover while enduring Trevor's inappropriate advances and Vivian's manipulative behavior demonstrated professional skills I'd never suspected. This wasn't Sienna's first undercover assignment, Harrison continued. She successfully infiltrated 4 other organizations where financial irregularities were suspected, gathering evidence that led to successful prosecutions and recovered millions in stolen company funds. Her transformation from seductive consultant to competent professional investigator suddenly made perfect sense. The sophisticated questions about business procedures, the rapid access to confidential documents, the strategic positioning within Trevor's sphere of influence, all of it had been carefully calculated to maximize her investigative effectiveness. When I realized we needed someone who could get close enough to Trevor to document his activities comprehensively, Sienna volunteered immediately, Harrison explained. She understood the assignment would require her to endure uncomfortable personal advances and manipulative family dynamics, but she was determined to protect honest business people from further financial damage. The timing of tonight's revelation had been orchestrated with military precision. Harrison needed Trevor to feel completely secure before exposing him, ensuring he wouldn't destroy evidence or transfer remaining stolen funds to hidden accounts. The launch party provided the perfect setting because Trevor would be relaxed and confident, surrounded by colleagues who would witness his downfall and ensure the story spread throughout the business community. Vivian's announcement was anticipated and even encouraged, Harrison admitted, with the strategic thinking that had made him successful in law. Sienna carefully manipulated your mother-in-law's desires and prejudices, making sure she felt confident enough to make a public statement about Trevor's supposed engagement. The cruel irony wasn't lost on either of us. Vivian's attempt to publicly humiliate me had actually provided the perfect platform for her son's professional execution. Her maternal pride had become the instrument of his destruction, witnessed by everyone who'd ever respected his business judgment. We knew Trevor's complete professional isolation would follow naturally from tonight's events, Harrison continued. No company in our industry will risk hiring someone with his ethical violations, and his reputation will ensure that tonight's story follows him wherever he attempts to restart his career. As Harrison's explanation concluded, I realized the evening's events weren't just about exposing Trevor's fraud or protecting business integrity. They represented a masterclass in strategic justice, delivered with precision that ensured maximum consequences for the perpetrator while protecting innocent parties from collateral damage. The investigation had been designed not just to catch a thief, but to ensure that his punishment would be comprehensive, permanent, and publicly witnessed by everyone who mattered in his professional and personal life. Harrison had orchestrated Trevor's complete downfall while simultaneously building a foundation for my fresh start, free from the burden of his crimes and deception. Standing in that hotel lobby, I finally understood that tonight's revelation was the culmination of months of careful planning designed to deliver justice with devastating efficiency while protecting everyone Trevor had betrayed or endangered through his selfish choices. The months that followed moved with surprising swiftness, as if the universe had decided to accelerate the consequences Trevor had been avoiding for so long. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a series of legal proceedings that would close this chapter of my life with the finality I desperately needed. My divorce attorney, Victoria Sterling, had never seen a more straightforward case in her 20-year career. The evidence Harrison provided painted such a comprehensive picture of Trevor's deception that settlement negotiations lasted exactly 47 minutes. Trevor's attorney essentially surrendered before the battle had even begun, understanding that fighting would only highlight his client's criminal behavior and provide prosecutors with additional evidence. His negotiating position was non-existent, Victoria explained with evident satisfaction. His stolen company funds had been frozen by court order, his employment had been terminated for cause, and his reputation was destroyed throughout the business community. He had nothing to bargain with except his willingness to accept whatever terms we proposed without resistance. I retained our house, my retirement accounts, and my personal assets while being completely protected from liability for his stolen funds or criminal debts. Trevor left the marriage with his personal belongings and whatever legitimate assets could be identified after restitution payments were calculated. The criminal trial began in March, exactly 4 months after that devastating launch party. I chose to attend as a witness rather than a victim, wanting to see justice delivered with my own eyes rather than reading about it in newspaper articles or hearing second-hand accounts from Victoria. The courthouse felt different from the family court where my divorce had been finalized. Here, the atmosphere was more formal, more serious, carrying the weight of criminal justice rather than civil resolution. Trevor sat at the defendant's table wearing an ill-fitting grey suit that made him look smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the confident executive who'd once commanded respect in boardrooms and social gatherings. The prosecutor presented Harrison's evidence with methodical precision, building a case that left no room for doubt about Trevor's systematic theft. $150,000 in fraudulent expenses documented over 6 months of deliberate deception. Each credit card statement, each forged receipt, each fabricated expense report was entered into evidence with clinical efficiency. The defendant used his position of trust to steal from multiple business clients while simultaneously betraying his wife and family, the prosecutor explained to the jury. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single poor decision. This was calculated, ongoing criminal behavior designed to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford through legitimate means. Trevor's defense attorney could offer little beyond pleas for leniency based on his client's cooperation with authorities and supposed remorse for his actions. But remorse was hard to demonstrate when the evidence showed such calculated planning and deliberate deception over such an extended period. I watched from the gallery as witness after witness testified about Trevor's fraudulent activities. Sienna took the stand with professional composure, explaining her investigation and the evidence she'd gathered without revealing any personal animosity despite the inappropriate advances she'd endured. Harrison testified about the financial losses his clients had suffered and the damage to business community trust caused by Trevor's breach of fiduciary responsibility. Even some of Trevor's former colleagues testified, their reluctance evident but their duty to honesty ultimately prevailing over personal loyalty. The picture they painted was of a man who'd become increasingly reckless and arrogant, believing his charm and position protected him from consequences. When the judge pronounced the sentence, 18 months in state prison followed by 3 years of probation and full restitution, Trevor's legs visibly buckled. The confident man who'd publicly humiliated me at a launch party was replaced by someone who could barely stand to face the consequences of his own choices. Vivian sat alone in the back row throughout the proceedings, a shadow of the commanding woman who'd orchestrated what she'd thought would be her son's triumph. The months since that launch party had aged her dramatically. Her perfectly styled hair had gone grey, her expensive clothes hung loosely on a frame that seemed to have shrunk with shame, and her once sharp eyes now carried the vacant look of someone who'd lost everything she'd thought mattered. She never approached me during the court proceedings, but I caught her staring at me several times with an expression that mixed regret with something that might have been recognition of her own culpability. The woman who'd wanted to replace me as her son's wife had instead orchestrated the destruction of everything she'd claimed to value about him. Walking out of the courthouse after Trevor's sentencing felt like stepping into sunlight after months in a cave. The weight of his lies, his betrayal, and his criminal behavior was finally off my shoulders. I was no longer married to a man who'd systematically deceived me, no longer responsible for maintaining facades that protected his reputation, no longer complicit in a relationship built on dishonesty. Sienna had parlayed her successful investigation into a thriving consulting career. Word of her professional competence spread quickly through the corporate security community, leading to job offers from major firms specializing in white-collar crime detection. Her unique combination of business education, investigative training, and proven field experience made her extremely valuable in a market where companies were increasingly concerned about internal fraud. She's probably the most sought-after investigator in the region now, Harrison told me during one of our occasional coffee meetings. 4 different firms have made her offers, and she's getting requests to speak at industry conferences about undercover corporate investigations. Sienna had transformed what could have been a traumatic experience into professional advancement, proving that intelligence and determination could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. Her success also validated Harrison's faith in her abilities and his decision to trust her with such a sensitive assignment. Harrison's law practice not only recovered substantial funds for his defrauded clients, but also implemented comprehensive new oversight procedures designed to prevent future embezzlement. His handling of the Trevor investigation became a case study in effective legal strategy, with business publications writing articles about his innovative approach to corporate fraud detection. His willingness to expose Trevor's crimes, even when it involved someone who'd been a significant client, demonstrated the kind of principled leadership that attracted both new clients and talented associates. Sometimes doing the right thing requires difficult choices, Harrison reflected during one of our conversations. But protecting the integrity of the business community and its honest participants was worth the temporary discomfort of conducting an investigation that involved people we'd trusted. For me, the most profound realization came not from watching Trevor receive his punishment, but from understanding how completely I'd reclaimed my own life. The woman who'd stood in that ballroom being publicly humiliated was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and completely comfortable with her own company. Trevor had thought he was trading up when he chose Sienna over me, pursuing youth and excitement over stability and commitment. Instead, he'd traded everything that actually mattered: his career, his reputation, his freedom, his family relationships, his financial security, for temporary gratification that had cost him his entire future. I'd gained something far more valuable than any settlement or vindication. I'd rediscovered my own strength, my ability to trust my instincts, and my right to expect honesty and respect in all my relationships. The months of self-doubt and confusion had been replaced by clarity and confidence that would serve me well in whatever came next. Standing in the courthouse parking lot after Trevor's sentencing, breathing the fresh spring air as a completely free woman, I realized this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a life built on authenticity rather than appearances, honesty rather than convenience, and self-respect rather than social expectations. Justice had been served completely, and my new beginning could finally start. If this story of justice and revenge resonated with you, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when I revealed Sienna's true identity at that launch party, watching Trevor's world crumble in real time. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of women taking back control. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.